Welcome to the Ohio Adult Allies podcast, where we are developing, inspiring, and empowering youth leaders. Today's topic is group cohesion and resiliency. Today we are talking with Cheryl Sells.
I am Cheryl Sells. I am with Comp Drug in Youth to Youth. I have professionally worked for this agency for almost 14 years, and I actually was involved in Youth to Youth when I was a teen myself, so I've actually been involved in some capacity since 1993. I'm not going to say how old I was then, but I was young, very young.
Robin Wilson.
My name is Robin Wilson. I am the project coordinator for a local coalition called Healthy Choices Caring Communities. I've been working both with that coalition and with our youth group, which is called the Youth Advisory Council, or YAC, for about 5 years. And then for the last 3 years, I have been involved more specifically in the regional learning and background planning for the YAC group.
And your host, Jessica Kalora.
My name is Jessica Kalora. I'm a research associate at the Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs. I do not personally facilitate a youth-led group right now, but I have worked in the field of youth civic engagement for the past 15 years, and I have the honor of working with the Adult Allies in Ohio for the past 5 years. Welcome to today's conversation on the topics of group cohesion and group resiliency. We're thankful to have two of our experienced adult allies with us today to help break down these concepts and give us greater clarity about what these terms mean in practice and why they matter for the work that we do with youth-led programs. In order to get started today, we just ask if you could please state your name, your organization, the youth-led group you facilitate, and your number of years of experience. So we know that this concept of group cohesion is important for the work of adult allies. And I'm wondering if each of you could just explain in your own words what that term means to you.
I think in my words, it's having a close connection as a youth-led group, being able to feel like you're a team and part of a team so that you can work together to create that change, just closeness.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's building that bond within your group, so that people can work well together and so that they have interpersonal relationships with other group members and with advisors, and just kind of building that internal structure, I guess.
So I'm hearing that really what it's about is these connections and the bonds that we have with one another in order to go out then and create some sort of community change. So if we know that it matters that the group has some sort of cohesion or bonding to each other, how do you foster that sense in your youth-led programs?
We try to foster this by setting like a shared goal or vision for the group, and then building that into the structure of our monthly meetings and trying to work on building communication within the group and between the group and the adults. We like to celebrate small successes and big successes. I think that the general positivity and team building can really add a lot to that.
Will you tell us a little bit more about the team building activities that you do?
Sure. We do a lot of different ones. Some of them are designed to build communication skills. Sometimes it's designed to develop different understandings on different areas of work that we're trying to add to our curriculum. But usually it's like a small group activity. We try to do things that will build that cohesiveness, will build that partnership, I guess, between the kids so that they can overcome an obstacle, even if it's a silly obstacle like carrying a balloon across the room, to build that, that sense of well-being, that we can do it attitude. And I think that it also helps those relationships to build as well.
Cheryl, what about you? How does your group help to foster that feeling of cohesion?
Every meeting is started with a get acquainted activity, and no matter what the meat of the meeting is, whether they're planning an event or working in committees or whatever it is, we always start our meetings the same way. And so having a get acquainted activity is something that they're used to doing. And we have the teens facilitate that activity, and the purpose of that is to break down barriers and for people to get to know each other on different levels. So sometimes, before the meeting has started, there's a circle and kids can walk in and and sit wherever they want. And it's only natural that they're going to sit next to their friends. So having a get acquainted activity is an opportunity to say, all right, now it's time to get up from where you are, move across the room, find a partner or whatever the structure of the activity asks to do, and talk to somebody who you didn't come here with. And then there's kind of structured questions or prompts that they have to do with that partner, which allows them to get to know something about the other person that they maybe wouldn't have already known before. And so now it's a structured way of guiding that conversation that sometimes is really difficult for teens to kind of start on their own. And so that's just a permanent piece, and the teens know every meeting is started that way. And it's been really, really beneficial to kind of give that opportunity for people to make new friends, to meet each other so that they can work together in whatever that capacity is. We also make time for retreats or overnights or fun events or things outside of our regular meeting time that helps create that cohesion and that team aspect. So every once in a while we'll say, hey, we're going to do a movie night tonight, or we're going to have a swim party in the summer. And so it gives an opportunity for them to have a fun shared experience outside of their regular meeting time.
Robin, I saw you smiling and nodding along with some of the things that Cheryl mentioned. Is there anything that you wanted to add based on the examples that Cheryl shared?
We also try to really provide opportunities for them to do on their own. So one of the things that we've done in the past is we've put up kind of a board, this obviously for in-person meetings, that it's had many names over the years. I think the last name was like fun slang version of like what's happening. I don't know, that's not how they wrote it out with an ing, but I think it was more just what's going on. And it was an opportunity for teens to kind of put up on the board, I have a basketball game, it's at this school at this time, or I'm in a school play, here's the dates. And so teens could kind of support each other if they wanted to take advantage of going to the game or attending the play or whatever they had, or some teens would say, oh, it's my birthday, I'm going to be at Easton, like come meet us. But it was an opportunity for them to kind of, not something that we structured, like not a official youth to youth event, but more something that they could kind of organically invite people to, leave open. And so that's been really helpful too, to kind of help with that cohesiveness.
She's right. The shared experience is just essential in building that group cohesion and building that engagement with your youth.
I heard a little bit in both of your responses, there's this distinction between friendships and then cohesion, right? So cohesion doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is really close friends, but it does mean that they know how to come together and interact with everyone, and that there's some, semblance of like civility and interaction and enjoyment in each other's company. So that was really helpful for me to hear in your descriptions.
And sometimes they could become close friends. And that's one of the things that I love about youth-led prevention, especially with us. And I think Robin's program is similar, but not all of the kids come from the same school. So we have teens that maybe would have never met each other had it not been for a program like this. And then they come down, walls are broken down, they start having shared experiences, and next thing you know, like it's their birthday and they're inviting their friends from YAB instead of their friends from school. Or they have, my stepdaughter, all of my stepchildren are involved in youth to youth currently, and it's a different experience for me to see now as a parent, which is unique. But some of her best friends that she spends most of her time with are people that don't go to her school, that she would have never met had she not been involved in this. And so I think that's one of the unspoken amazing aspects of youth-led prevention, is that you get to meet people who you may not have met otherwise, that maybe come from a different area and have a different background and different experiences, but you realize we're still a lot alike. And had it not been for this program, we wouldn't have been able to learn about each other. And I just love that aspect. And so I think that's the other piece that some of this team building and this group cohesion is really important for, is that development of the youth themselves, that it's not only about getting them to work together for outcomes and change, but it's personal growth that they all have the opportunity to have as well. So they're learning about themselves, they're learning about other people, they're learning about other cultures, experiences, all of that, and it only makes them stronger in the end. So
that was such a great explanation, Cheryl, too, about what we use in the terms of like individual empowerment, so that we know there's the individual growth that then happens by interacting in a setting that's really intentionally structured and created by the adult allies, and they're always working together. So you're creating the group cohesion for how everyone interacts together, but through that you see young people developing their own skills as well. And you spoke to that both as an individual in your own experiences in youth led, and then what you see occurring with youth that you work with, stepchildren that that are in the program as a parent now. So it's helpful to hear you speak about it from those different lenses. So I think we started talking a little bit about the types of things, since we know that this cohesion really matters for the ultimate success of a youth-led program and for the work that young people are able to accomplish. I'm wondering if there's things that you look for as an adult ally, because we know you all are constantly critically reflecting and assessing on the culture of your youth-led program. So when you're doing that assessment and reflection, what are you looking for as some sort of signs or indications that your group is cohesive or is getting along and bonding?
I like to look for commitment. I feel like if your group cohesion is really there or building, I think that you can kind of see more and more of the kids expressing commitment towards a common goal or towards our project focus of the year. Better engagement in activities, whether it is fun activities or even work, quote unquote, work activities. And I think that for me, I like to look for pride in the group. So if you're excited to come and you're proud of your participation, I think that can also be a good indication.
I agree. I think when they're proud of their accomplishments, that's huge. And they share that excitement with each other, like, look what we did, or or if a lot of times, not to encourage competition, but a lot of times you have smaller groups working on different things, and when one group is really excited about their work, that's kind of that cohesiveness that comes together as a group combined, prideful. And so that's a really good sign. I think other things that we look for just in general are, do they appear to be enjoying being around each other? And you can tell when your teens, are they having fun or are they just getting the work done? Does it seem like they're making general natural connections, or are they just assigned to do the same sort of projects? And so I think you can kind of look at that. Are they meeting new people? Are they initiating things with people that they don't normally initiate with? Are they inviting or including other people in some of the things that they're doing is huge. So our meetings are 2 hours, and sometimes, maybe they come back together and then there's some downtime as they're waiting for rides or they're getting ready to leave or whatever, and they just have some chill hangout time. And it's interesting during that kind of downtime to watch them, to see who they're interacting with, how they're interacting. Are they just going to their phones because they haven't been on them for the past hour and a half, or are they taking advantage of the opportunity to continue to make connections? And so noticing that is sometimes helps to see, is this everybody? Is it just a small group of people? Those are a lot of times people, I think, I've had staff members in the past that have looked at that downtime as like, oh, I'm done. I don't have to work. They're just hanging out now. We're not doing programming. And I think it's a really crucial time to observe how your group is interacting and to see, and for staff to have connection time as well. But there's a lot you can take in when you're watching them on their downtime and seeing how they interact and what they're doing and what they're talking about and things like that. So that's a great indicator, I think, to see that cohesiveness. And
as I'm listening to both of you talk, I'm just thinking of how helpful it is to hear about those indications of what you're looking for and that people are kind of getting along and bonding. And it also made me wonder if you have recommendations or a story to share about when your young people didn't get along, right? We know that sometimes there are these tensions in the group, but we don't often talk about the opposite side of the coin. We kind of focus on like, how do you get them to get along? But do you have any examples or recommendations for when young people just don't seem to be bonding or connecting, what you've had to do as an adult ally to overcome those challenges internally?
it's been a little while since I've been as engaged as some of the other members of my staff, but I do remember, well, it seems to be kind of like an ebb and flow. Like every couple of years we have the same issue, but we've had some issues with cliques at YAB. And even if they're not like friends that initially came together, they're new friends that they became friends at YAB. And now they are this like clique of, these are the teens that always hang out. And while that's really exciting that they've made new friends, there's also then this other side of like other people who aren't part of that tight crew that feel a little bit left out. And so, here's this big group of people. They are now really good friends. They come from different schools. They've connected because of YB, but there's still some outsiders that don't feel a part of that. And what do we as a staff need to do to kind of eliminate that feeling? And so there's a couple different things we've done in the past to try to get creative with cliques. So our group is always in a circle of chairs. They kind of come into the room and it's a circle and they can sit wherever they want. We've never made assigned seats. And so when we started noticing that they were all sitting in the same place every single time, we would purposely do activities that get them. So there's one called Upset the Fruit Basket. I'm sure anyone in youth prevention has done something like this. They have different names of the activity, but you're sitting in a chair and somebody's in the middle and they say, I like people who have glasses. And then everybody who has glasses has to get up out of their seat and move across the circle to a different seat. And then the last person it's kind of like musical chairs, there's one less seat. So the last person to get a seat has to stand in the middle and then say something else. Oh, I like people who are wearing jeans. And then everybody who's wearing jeans has to get up and move. And then you can say upset the fruit basket. And then everybody has to move to a different spot. So we've done that activity a million times. It's no new thing for the teens, but sometimes we'll do that and then just stop the game and say, just stay where you are, and we're going to get on with tonight's meeting. So now, it's in a weird way, they're not sitting with the people that they chose to sit with. And we're just like, oh, we're just going to go ahead and start with our meeting and just stay where you are. Because it's not like school where they have to bring a backpack and all of their stuff, and they're all in the same room anyway. So if they had anything with them, they can see it clearly across the room. So that's been one attempt for us to kind of break up where people are physically sitting. And then other ways are just simply, in the example of like a clique, we would go to them and say, we love that you guys have connected. We love that you guys are now friends. We need you to help us bring some other people in, break up during this time, step up as leaders. And so-and-so Jessica is over there sitting by herself. Can you guys pull her in? Or can you guys make sure that she's part of the group work that you're doing? And then they feel like, oh, well, I have especially been asked by the leaders to pull this person in. And then over time, hopefully they start to feel more part of that team. And I think with some of your go-to teams that you really rely on, or that are going to do what you want them to do, you can kind of give them that look like, why are you guys together again? And they get it, and they realize that it's part of their role as a leader in this program to meet new friends, to make new connections. And a person coming down for the very first time isn't going to feel that, and they're not going to be expected the same way. But those people who have been involved for a long time kind of have a different level of expectation. And I think it's fair of the adult ally to ask that of them. And that's worked for us before.
We have a similar activity, Cheryl. We just call it I love my neighbor. So you have to call out I love my neighbor who has whatever characteristic. But I like the whole upset the entire fruit basket idea. We do a couple of other activities that we do to try and intentionally break up groups when we are having a lot of trouble with cliques that are kind of similar, where you have to find a partner that you are not familiar with or that doesn't go to your school or that you haven't partnered with before. And then at the end, you have to sit down with them. And then we move on with the meeting that's a little bit like a sneak attack against cliques. So we also do, with varying levels of success, what we do is we try to bring the leadership board together at the beginning of the year, and we talk about how many new members we have, and we try to select various different members for them to purposefully reach out to. And sometimes that works really great, and sometimes it doesn't. So we try not to force people who don't have the best interpersonal skills, and also, sometimes personality types are different. And you don't always know what that's going to look like until you have some interactions with those people. But by doing that, we have sort of a groundwork for the beginning of the year so that this member who's been in YAC for 3 years and is part of our leadership board knows that these 5 people are kind of not necessarily their responsibility, but that they have taken the role of a mentor for them to make sure that they get involved, to try and build those extra relationship times into the meeting, or to sit by them if they see them alone and that kind of stuff. And we've had some years where it worked out great, and we've had some years where, we couldn't see a huge difference. I think it depends on the commitment of your leadership team, how well that works, and probably the commitment of the advisor to remind the leadership team.
There's this other concept that's really important with a youth-led program, and that's this notion of group resiliency. I'm wondering if both of you can just explain in your own words what group resiliency means.
To me, I think group resiliency is like the ability to bounce back from issues, adapt around problems, and grow together.
I love that explanation. Thank you. Cheryl, how would you describe group resiliency in your own words?
How do they overcome whatever the challenge that arises? How are they able to move forward? So looking at it in a positive way, okay, this isn't what we planned, but how are we going to adapt? And instead of saying, well, now we can't do it. Now, well, this isn't the way that it was supposed to go, so I guess this isn't something we can do at all. It's really about adapting and still being able to find a way to be successful.
So what do you do as adult allies to intentionally foster that group resiliency so that they are prepared when failures happen, that they can kind of work together to overcome them?
With our group, I think one thing is we actually, I don't want to say we plan for failure, but we talk about what are we going to do if XYZ occurs. Obviously, we're focusing on the main goal and the plan itself, like what we want to happen, and here's how we're going to go about that. But I think sometimes it's saying, all right, so what happens if this doesn't occur in the time that we want it to, or if we don't have the dollars to support this, or we don't have people attend the event that we're planning. And those types of situations, a lot of times as a staff, we have to look at that too. Like, we've planned this activity, our average number of teens is 30, and what do we do if only 10 show up? Because this activity that we planned for 30 is not the same as if you have 10. And I think we have learned that over time. Don't plan something for 40 people and then 5 show up, and now you're like, well, I can't do this now. Like, what are we going to do? And so I think the same thing goes with teen leaders in a youth-led group, is that, yes, let's keep our goals where they are, and as allies, helping them to, instead of tearing down ideas, instead of saying that's unrealistic, we need to set them up for success. So figuring out ways to help them reach that. Okay, well, that's a great goal to have. Now let's look at what happens if we don't meet that goal. What happens if, or what happens if we don't get there when we want to? So practicing things is huge. We, like I said earlier, we have our teens do a get acquainted activity to start our meeting, and we don't just throw them in there. We'll have them either come down early and practice it, physically in front of us, or we'll have a phone call with them and say, okay, because even a simple get acquainted activity can really throw the group off if it's not done correct. People are like, I don't get it. Wait, you said we have to do this, but now you're saying, and so then the teen who's leading that is now feeling like bad about themselves. And so we don't want that. And so what we do is we have them practice, so they're set up for success. And sometimes they think that's annoying, but then we have to explain to them, well, we want it to go well, we want you to be prepared, and it's all about setting them up for that success, but then allowing that failure to occur, and evaluating that and looking at that and saying, well, we didn't fail, we just didn't meet our initial goal, and so how do we adapt and keep going forward? And so Robin had talked earlier about celebrating successes, and I think that is huge in resiliency as well, in that, okay, it's not just about the end goal, it's about the small steps that lead us to that as well.
Thanks, Cheryl. Robin, what about you? How do you guys foster that sense of resiliency in your youth-led program?
I love what Cheryl said about giving them the opportunity to be successful or to fail, and building resiliency even through failure. To say, maybe we planned to do X, Y, and Z didn't happen, but we still did X and Y and we killed it, or whatever the case might be. I think it's really important not to be a critic, I guess, or a negative Nancy, or whatever the case might be, or whatever the words are, to be positive and build positivity within your group. Like, we can do this, and if we can't be successful in this avenue, then we'll just take a slight right and we'll be successful in this avenue, or whatever adaptation might work best. I think that it's really important to have, like Cheryl said, she starts every meeting with those interpersonal activity and team building activities. I think that routines and solid expectations, the structure of the group, help so much in resiliency building. I think those little and big celebrations, or win celebrations, are huge. And I think that you can't criticize or point out, hey, you guys said you were going to do this and you didn't, in too negative a way. You have to have this positive spin. Okay, we said we were going to do this, but now we missed our opportunity. We have all of this other background work. Where can we go from here?
The relationship that the teens have with the adult ally is really crucial, because when things don't go as planned, or when a teen maybe is hard on themselves and they feel like, oh, I messed up, or I didn't do what I should have done, they need to feel comfortable to be able to go to that adult ally for that constructive feedback, and trusting that when we say, oh, it's okay, and here's what we're going to do to move forward, that they believe us, that they trust that what we're saying is true and helpful. If they don't have that relationship, then it's, oh, well, that you guys have to say that, it's your job, or those type of thing, or every adult says that, or you're just saying that to make me feel better. But having established relationships and in an open communication with the teens, it's resiliency is also built by learning and growth. In youth-led programs, if they don't feel discomfort every once in a while, then it doesn't allow for that resiliency to occur. Then it doesn't allow for them to say, you know what, I did have this experience one time and this happened, but now I know I am going to practice, because that one time when I didn't and I thought I could just wing it, I learned the hard way. And you don't really want that to happen for the teens, but when they have that learned opportunity, you're like, okay, now you believe me when I say let's practice beforehand, and winging it is not an option, and and here's why. Because it's not about us as adult allies trying to make these kids perfect or have them be puppets or saying these things that we're programming them to say. That's not the case at all. It's about setting them up for success and giving them an opportunity to practice something that they've maybe never done before. But having that trust in us is key for that to happen. Otherwise, it may come off as not the intent it's supposed to have.
I think it's a really critical point in that we know that many adult allies are reticent or scared to let their young people fail. And one of the things that I'm hearing you both say is that part of your role as an adult ally is at times to allow your young people to feel some discomfort because they have to experience that in order for the growth. When we're talking about kind of group resiliency and the group failing, that framing as an adult ally is really important, and the words that we choose to use when explaining and talking about the experience that they just had and what they want to do next matters greatly. I also heard some things you intentionally do on the front end of preparing the group to be resilient, which is kind of having backup plans. So whatever they're about to go and do in the community, you know, if we kind of talk through options A, B, C, and D and kind of think of the possibilities, that's going to prepare them better. I'm wondering if you have, similar to the conversation with group cohesion, kind of that example on the flip side. I think some of what we heard in the examples are kind of that individual resiliency, like I may go up and not do as well as I wanted to, and I'm going to, you know, beat myself up a little bit about it. And my adult ally is going to help me think through what just happened and what I can do next time to avoid that. But with group cohesion or with group resiliency, if the young people are working together to do something and the strategy they're implementing isn't a success, what do you do in those situations? Because I think it's common in those situations then for your cohesion to also potentially suffer, right? Because it may be, we did this, like we had this strategy that we were going to go implement and we didn't get, you know, we didn't reach as many people as we wanted to. And then it's natural for a group to kind of point fingers, right? Like, well, this didn't work, but it's because this person said they were going to do this and this didn't happen. And then of course that is related to what you were saying before with cohesion. So what do you do for the group when it's a failure as a group?
I think it's important to talk about what happened as honestly and as well without finger pointing as much as possible. You know, what happened? Where did we misstep? And I think it is really important to talk about what did we do and how much progress did we make and what can we build that into. So maybe, for example, I think it was the first year that I was involved in our YAC program. The kids had planned to do a really elaborate project of focus, and they were going to develop one of those fun runs. I don't know if you're familiar with those, where they, you know, like crawl through the mud and climb up a wall and all that stuff. Because a couple of years before that, they had done a fun run where they throw the colors on your shirt or whatever, the color runs. So they thought this was a great idea, but they just couldn't quite get enough community support to build up the run and get all of the background things ready in a timely manner. And so we had all of this work, and then we couldn't get the run ready on time in order to actually, you know, register people and complete it. And there was some finger pointing and a lot of stuff. Thankfully, Beth was really the leader of the moment, and she was able to facilitate that work through and kind of talk about, well, we did this work and we did this work. And although, you know, we didn't necessarily get to Z, we did all the letters before Z. And now where can we go from here? What can we do with the time we have remaining? What can this work build into other than this run that was not successful? And so I think that was really an important frame.
I agree. And I love that example that you used, because I think oftentimes teens think really big. And as an adult ally, sometimes you're like, so I had a really similar experience with a different group, not our YB, but a community coalition that I work with. And they wanted to do a 5K and raise money and do all this stuff. And we had done 5Ks in the past and knew that they sometimes took over a year to plan. And these teens were trying to do it in, like a 6-month period of time. And so we were trying really hard not to say there's no way that can happen, by guiding them and giving them, and like, let's look at all of the steps that we need to take and who do we need to contact. And I think that goes with part of planning for that resiliency. But then, they weren't able to be successful. And as adult allies, it's not mature to say, I told you so. But of course, we were thinking that. But what we did was we made it a learning, like very similar to what you said, Robin, with how you have a conversation with everybody about it, and almost saying like, this is not one person's fault. So there's no point in pointing. There's no point in pointing fingers. It doesn't matter. It's we as a group tried, and here's why we weren't successful. But what can we do moving forward? And the group one year, they said, you know what, we didn't have enough time. And of course, us as advisors were like, what? No. But, we were like, good that they came to that on their own, and we didn't have to point that out. And so we said, okay, so is all of this stuff, is all of the work that you did a waste? And they were like, no, now we've done all of this and we can start planning for next year. So it didn't happen this year. And yes, maybe some seniors will graduate and they didn't get to see this happen, but they were a part of the planning of something that does happen after they leave. And so kind of having that conversation about, some things take a really long time and you may not even be able to see the end result, but you were part of that process. And so, okay, it didn't work this year. Now we have a great start to next year's. And we just know we start now, and hopefully we can do that. And I wish that I had a really great success story to share at the end, but this was last year that they were trying to do that. And then this year they were trying to make that run happen. And then, COVID happened and that didn't occur.
Yes, we were unlucky enough to have planned in-person presentations for the end of this year, which obviously did not happen. So I was really impressed. The kids, they still show up to the meetings. They revised the entire project and then executed it in the course of about 3 meetings. They just proved their resiliency, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. They did a great job coming together, and although it wasn't necessarily the ideal situation, they really proved that they were committed and that they really got what we were trying to do here.
Robin, how did they change their plans?
So originally they had planned to do in-person presentations for the middle school, possibly in science or health. They were trying to educate youth on the risks of vaping. And so instead of an in-person education, they created a video. It's about 6 minutes long, where they talk about the effects of vaping and some of the reasons why it's a risky behavior and why you shouldn't do it. And it's a very cute video. You'll have to check it out. But they just really did a great job. They revised it from in-person educational material into a fun and interesting video.
That's great. And I really appreciate both of you emphasizing how timely this concept of resiliency is in light of the public health crisis that we're all facing, and how that has impacted youth-led programs, because I think this is something that all adult allies are struggling with as they're guiding their young people through what feels like a series of losses for many youth, and how you can kind of frame what the opportunities still are and have them still be connected in some way to meaningful work. So thank you for pointing that out. So we've heard a lot of different information and ideas exchanged in today's conversation, and I'm wondering if you could each just share one piece of advice to adult allies about building group cohesion.
I think that best advice that I could give, and it probably is applicable to both, but intentionally build it into your program planning. Just like Cheryl mentioned, every meeting starts with a team building game specifically. That I think that's very important to plan for it in advance, so that when you're there at the meeting, you don't have to plan for it because it's already done.
I would agree. I think it's it's definitely, cohesion is not something that just comes naturally. When we talk about successful and effective youth-led prevention, that has to be a part of the planning process, just like everything else. And I think hugely on the role of the adult ally, as it's not as easy for the teens to recognize or suggest or come up with the idea. Oftentimes they do, especially the ones who have been involved for a while, will look and say, something's off with this group. I think we need to do something. And so I think listen to the teens, watch them, and plan and make that a part of. It works for us to do at the beginning of every meeting. It may not work for everybody, depending on how much time you have, depending on where you meet and your goals. But in some way, make time for some sort of group connected activity.
And similarly, if you could give one piece of advice to adult allies about building group resiliency, what would it be?
Just overall, I think it's really, really important for teens to learn that not everything goes as planned, and it's our responsibility as adults to model how to respond to that. Not tell them what to do, but model that response, because we have to lead by example. And I think that is part of that process. It's not about what happened, it's about how do we respond to what happened. And I think that's really important, not just to reach your end goal, but just to build teens into successful adults. And it's just yet another skill that they're gaining.
I like what you said about making sure that you are not expressing fault, I guess. Making sure that you're saying, well, we're all responsible here. Nobody's specifically at fault. I always like to say, this is where we're at. We're the ones who drove here. We're the ones who choose the direction we can drive from here. And if you can own the drive that got you to the place that you're in, then you can own the drive that will get you where you want to go. I think that that's kind of important. I guess optimistic, sort of positive attitude. Yes, we may have had a hiccup, but we also were successful in these other 5 areas, and we can still reach this destination, even if it wasn't originally our intended destination.
Well, thank you both for sharing some very practical tips today about how we can foster group cohesion and group resiliency and why those two concepts really matter. I appreciate how you were able to kind of articulate the intentionality that comes in thinking through and reflecting on these aspects of your work with young people. And I'm sure that people who are listening to this podcast should feel free, if they're so inclined, to reach out to either of you for additional information around these two aspects of our work with youth-led programs.
Thank you for listening to the Ohio Adult Allies podcast. You can find more of our episodes on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play by searching Ohio Adult Allies. Episodes are available at www.ohioadultallies.com.